Schizophrenics of Reddit, what is the scariest hallucination, visually or audibly, that you have ever experienced? My friend in college was schizophrenic. We were once hanging out in his dorm room at night, maybe 11 PM midnight, and he got up to go to the bathroom. He opened the door and stopped, staring at the empty hallway. He asked me to come to the door and tell him if something seemed weird. I walk up to the door and see nothing strange in the hall and tell him so. He asks me if I can hear something. I say no. He said he heard muffled crying or arguing or something coming from down the hall, and he saw a pitch black hallway when it was actually fully lit. He said the hall was black, not just dark or dimly lit. At this point he is shaking and I'm terrified because I don't know he's sick. We're both on the verge of tears. I'm not even sure he knew he was sick at the time. I ended up walking him to the bathroom and then spending the night in his room because he could still hear someone crying in the hall. I thought for the longest time he was pulling my leg, but he ended up going to therapy and getting on meds very shortly after that night, so it was a terrifying and very real moment for him too. Your good friend. Brother is schizophrenic and had insane hallucinations for about a year before I could get him help. He constantly believed people were assaulting him and trying to kill him. On one occasion he ran so long to get away from them he was admitted into the hospital for heat exhaustion. He didn't understand why we wouldn't help him and would lash out at us. He's now severely medicated and nowhere near the person he once was. I have psychosis and it usually is worst when I'm alone or at night. Doubly so if I'm alone at night. When I was house training my puppy I had him outside at 3 AM. And I saw what looked like the KKK and some witches having a scenes. I then heard whispers mentioning killing and saw the group start walking up the street towards my house. Thankfully, that's the worst it's ever been. I do still have minor fleeting hallucinations when I'm stressed, but it's more like seeing a shadow out of the corner of my eye and is much easier to ignore. I'm prone to occasional psychotic episodes. No formal diagnosis has been made to include this. I have previously been diagnosed with BPD, but it's not really common to have episodes of psychosis with BPD, so I'm waiting to be re-evaluated. I was admitted to the crisis ward in November because I was 100% convinced my whole body was rotting from the inside out. I was decomposing from within and it was spreading outward to my extremities. This was terrifying for me, not because I was afraid of dying but because no one believed me that I was decomposing. No one saw it as an issue, and realizing that my reality is not reality was so traumatic and isolating. I'm really not looking forward to the next inevitable episode. I've never had psychotic episodes, but I am bipolar and I've had anxiety attacks where I am absolutely convinced my heart is giving out and I'm on the verge of death. It's not quite as extreme as rotting, but I think the thought and sensation of serious physical ailments is quite common with panic disorder. Somebody I knew back in high school had schizophrenia, but was taking medication for it. She accidentally skipped a dose once and she came to school hysterical that she didn't want to go back home because she heard someone chewing human meat under her bed. Human meat? How does one even know what that sounds like? First off, I just wanna say I have hallucinations categorized as psychosis instead of schizophrenia. They do this when your symptoms don't quite line up with aren't bad enough for the regular diagnosis. And I can tell you I have actually peed myself in fear from some of my hallucinations. I can't even imagine how bad it must be for people whose symptoms line up with schizophrenia. As for my scariest hallucination, it will always be my first visual hallucination. I was in school, like 10th grade, and I'd heard voices for a bit now, to the point that I was almost getting used to the fact that I hear things others don't. I remember getting up from my desk to use the toilet, and when I got out of the room, I see this man with no face, just standing there facing me. At first I just thought my eyes were messing with me, so I blink a couple times, shake my head a little bit, and look back, and he's gone. No way he could have moved in those empty, silent hallways without me hearing it, but he's gone. So I just go to the bathroom, thinking it's kinda weird, but not thinking too much about it. I even joked with myself that now I'm seeing things too, haha. But when I got to the bathroom, he's there again, standing in the doorway. I stop and just kind of stare for a second, more curious than anything. Then I think, well, maybe he's just wearing a mask or something, and I ask if he can move over and let me in the bathroom. But then this other kid comes out and asks who I'm talking to. Right as he walks through the faceless guy, I just stand there, speechless. Cause what do you say in that situation? The kid looks at me like I'm weird, but then just walks away. The dude with no face moves over to let me by, and I give him as wide a berth as I can while I go in, never taking my eyes off him. He followed me into the bathroom, and a few seconds later this girl walks in, and I begin telling her that she's in the wrong bathroom. I'm a guy FWI. When I notice that she doesn't have a face either, they both begin walking towards me, and at that point I am pretty dang scared, so I go and hide in one of the stalls and bawl my eyes out. Cause at this point I realize that I'm pretty much just crazy. I didn't come out until the staff came and talked me into it. The two of them, the guy and the girl, show up every now and again. Note, I've since graduated and moved away from there, but they still show up wherever I am, but they never do anything, so I don't know what to make of it. But that first time scared the living crap out of me. It's gotta be hard having others think you're crazy, and not knowing if things are real or not. Thanks for sharing. I had a patient with schizophrenia, full visual and auditory hallucinations, off of his meds and screaming in public. Demons were coming out of the ground trying to grab him. They were yelling at him various obscene things. Weird part was that once we are on scene, he calmed down and recognized the uniforms. Fully cooperative, but that was an interesting patient history. Are you having hallucinations? Yup. Describes them in detail. So how are you so calm right now? This is normal when I am off my meds and I know I am in an ambulance. This was normal for him. My mom worked at a placement home for high-functioning mentally ill people. Occasionally, they would go off their meds and start the cycle down into their illness again. One woman called screaming because there were demons in her shoes. If she put her shoes on, they would crawl into her feet by going under her toenails and then invade her body from the legs up. Schizophrenics will sometimes apply delusional thinking to somatic experiences they are having. Somebody else mentioned athlete's foot, and I think that is highly likely. I once treated a schizophrenic with athlete's foot who was convinced invisible nurses were sneaking into his room and sticking him with needles between his toes to drive him crazy. My best friend is schizophrenic. I was chatting with him on a skateboard break on the north side of Milwaukee, WI. He flinched suddenly, really hard. Later told me he saw a man run up on me with a hatchet and slice me to pieces. One of the veins in my eye was actually a worm that was eating my brain, and that's why I had headaches. Also, random sharp pains and itches are bugs crawling all over my skin, trapped in my shoes, etc. I double check my shoes every time I put them on with a flashlight, but still have to take them off occasionally to check. I always check the insides of shoes before wearing them. 3 reasons. 1. Toy Story, I got a snake in my boot. I'm almost 30. 2. I once put a boot on and there was a furry caterpillar inside. 3. I read once that you should always knock your boots out because scorpions like to crawl inside. I live nowhere near scorpions. Snipers. One Friday evening I was watching TV and happened to be playing with the flashlight that I left on the coffee table. Boom. Next thing you know I'm in a full-blown hallucination. I heard a special forces team out the window as they were sneaking out of my backyard. I flashed the light around the room and they got quiet, and they misunderstood my intent. They thought the light was mounted on a rifle. Next thing you know they're calling me outside as part of a SWAT response, and I'm on my hands and knees on my porch in the dead of night, asking them to please not shoot me. I must have stayed out there about 2 hours, with my hands locked behind my head, as the snipers got more and more nervous about what I might do. Eventually they decided that there was no way to defuse the situation, and they shot me. I spent about 5 minutes laying dead on my front porch, then crawled inside my house to die. I phoned my mom to let her know that I'd been shot and that special forces had killed me. Needless to say she wasn't buying it, and talked me down to earth a little bit, but that wasn't the end of it. She had me go to the ER, and stayed with me on the phone until I got there. I'm still in full-blown hallucination mode, so while I'm waiting in the ER I hear the leader of the special forces unit chatting with the front desk nurse. He knows that I'm there, and is coming to get me. Luckily the doctor found me first, and didn't really know what to do with me, so he gave me 2 milligrams of Ativan and discharged me. So I drive home, Still hallucinating and now somewhat high from the 8 oven, and I see all types of crazy stuff on the way home. Once I get home the 8 oven mellows the hallucinations into something enjoyable, and I spend the rest of the weekend with playful hallucinations. I can't really describe the fear of having special forces snipers aiming at you for 2 hours straight. Fortunately, the scariest I've ever had is just people calling my name from another room when I know I'm the only person in the house. My audible hallucinations don't have a great vocabulary, and most of the time just sound like someone doing jazz scat, which is kind of annoying and makes it hard to sleep. Visually, I'll sometimes see people standing in windows who aren't there on a second glance, or small shadows darting around like mice. I'm extremely fortunate that my symptoms are relatively mild. Schizoaffective disorder here, but that's close enough, I think. Most of the time my hallucinations are pretty mundane, but I do recall a few extreme ones. Worst of all would have to have been the time I was convinced I was being abducted by aliens. I was in bed and staring at the ceiling when a bright light appeared like a circle above me, and I felt like I was being raised up into the air from a center point in my chest. I could see shadowy figures gathered all around the bed looking at me being lifted, and they were all whispering, but the whispers gradually grew louder until it was like the sound of wind. But I somehow snapped back into reality, very frightened but obviously unscathed. That had to have been the most intense hallucination I've had in my life. Sometimes I've been known to talk to apparently disturbing things that aren't there, but I have dissociative amnesia and don't often remember doing so. That's all filled in by people I know who have observed me, though I never really know if they're telling me the truth, which does bug me a lot. I have a lot of paranoia surrounding people telling me what I've done in dissociative episodes and them just lying to me to get me to think a certain way about myself or something. I don't know. It's rough never being sure of anything. I'm not schizophrenic, but I get psychotic episodes. My hallucinations tend to stick to one sense but sometimes kind of bleed into each other. I often hallucinate bugs on surfaces that aren't there, as I try to squish them without anything happening. I suppose the scariest one was a body lying on the floor of my bedroom and it was wheezing. For me, each sense has a different impact when I hallucinate something. Hearing something is extremely distracting and annoying but isn't scary anymore. Seeing something usually spikes my fear response, as well as tactile hallucinations. Thank God it's never happened before that a hallucination was occupying all of my senses at the same time. I'm not sure if I could handle that. Schizoaffective, bipolar subtype. It's not a specific hallucination, but sometimes I have very vivid memories of things that didn't happen, and they make me second guess every single thing that I can remember or know, because if my memory failed me once, why wouldn't it fail me twice? And then everything spirals downwards. You have been visited by the fashion doggo. Comment your envy strengthens me, so you always look beautiful. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.